All right, now that we've added a patient, the patient's information, we can advance to page 2 to start working on the actual meat and potatoes of this chart. So this is page 2. It talks about the patient's chief complaint, history of present illness, scene description, etc., etc., etc. So a couple of these boxes might change a little bit going forward, but for the most part, we have the patient's initial acuity, which will be defined in the data dictionary, but for the most part, if the patient's able to walk, and we kind of follow triage guidelines, patient's able to walk would be lower acuity green, but I wouldn't worry about that too much. The data dictionary will spell that out. Chief complaint of the patient, this would be, if you remember from our call sheet, that center box where you could, mark down if it was chest pain or a cardiac arrest or altered mental status or something like that. This is what you would be putting into that box otherwise. So this patient was a breathing problem, so we'll put down he's having some shortness of breath. The complaint has been going on for, let's say, an hour. So we have 1 hour, or if the patient said that, this has been going on for a week, you could select 1 and then week. It's very straightforward. And then if you'd like, you can select this button and put down whatever the patient was doing when this started. So if the patient was, there's so many options here. Let's say the patient was, walking his dog and noted that he began feeling short of breath after walking his dog. You could put that in there. The next option here is a history of present illness. Now, people complete charts a couple of different ways, but for the most part, this is actually the section where the majority of your narrative should go. This is everything talking about what's going on with the patient, how did we get here, what's his history like, what treatments is going on. This is what I personally use as my narrative box, if you will. In the activity log on page 8, you can sort of break that down a little bit as you go along and provide treatment, so you don't necessarily have to repeat yourself in various spots, because if you're putting in the activity log that you provided oxygen to the patient by non-rebreather, you don't necessarily have to go into great detail with that in the history of present illness box. But for the most part, I would treat this box here as your narrative. And you can take this little box here in the right-hand corner of this little field, and you can expand this if you want to see a bigger box, if it's helpful for you. So, say, whatever you want to put in your narrative. Just because, you were dispatched to 26 Liberty, you got there, you realized, this patient's actually at 68 Sussex Street. I'm not sure how that kind of dispatch error would happen, but, finish out your narrative like that. Reason for encounter, was this an injury, a trauma, or was this a medical patient? So trauma, medical patient, pretty straightforward. Non-injuries or trauma, or it's a medical patient. Any alcohol or drug usage? Unknown. Alcohol, drugs, none. If it was alcohol, you could select this button and say exactly what led you to that belief. Was there alcohol in his breath? Did he admit to drug use? Did he admit to alcohol use? Or if they denied it, you can select the not present option here as well. If this was a trauma, the additional injury details allow you to put in various other information. So was it an intentional injury? Are you taking the patient to a trauma center? If so, what criteria are you using? what was the mechanism of the injury, if they fell, how far was the fall, what did they fall on, what part of their body did they fall on, was it related to work, were they wearing any safety equipment, like if this was a bicycle accident, were they wearing a helmet, lots of options there. The next box, the cardiac arrest, really refers to the cardiac arrest box that we have on the left-hand side on our call sheet. Was there an arrest present? Who witnessed it? What time did it start? Who did CPR? Was the patient defibrillated? Why did you stop? What was the outcome? Etc., etc., etc. Any motor vehicle accidents, you can select all this information. How many vehicles? Where was the impact? Blah, blah, blah. So also, an important thing to note is that say this was for a motor vehicle accident, this chart. You're putting all of this information, airbag deployment, vehicle impact site, location of the patient in vehicle, etc., etc., etc. Some people would otherwise then also put that in their narrative, but you don't have to because it's already being accounted for on your chart. So if you're putting here that the patient was, wearing safety equipment in the additional injuries detail, so you put the patient was wearing, a lap belt and a shoulder belt for their seat belt. And in the motor vehicle accident box, you were putting that, this was 2 cars, there was airbag deployed, the patient was the driver, front seat, left side, etc., etc., etc. You now don't, in your narrative, have to say patient was the restrained driver of a 3-car motor vehicle accident. He was, whatever, the impact site was, moderate damage on the front. This is all being accounted for in your boxes here. So even though it might seem like there are a lot more boxes that you have to fill out throughout this chart, you're taking care of your narrative and you're making it really nice, short, and tight because all of the other information is being taken care of by all these boxes. And as we go forward and start actually doing these charts, it's going to take some time to realize what the options are here and how to restrict your narrative to things that are not necessarily covered by other boxes, but we'll be pointing these out with QA flags as we go along. If you look here on the right-hand side, you have the scene description. So if you arrive and the patient was, sitting in their kitchen, this is also something that you wouldn't necessarily have to then put in your narrative here, like I did. Received sitting in the chair of the kitchen. You could put that, the patient sitting in chair in kitchen of private residence or house or something like that. Were you the first agency on scene? Yes or no? Maybe you were. Sometimes you get there before the police department. Sometimes you get there before the paramedics. It all depends on what happens. So let's say we weren't because the police department was there, and let's say that the medics beat us as well. So other services that were on scene, you can type these here. So we have EMS, other EMS options. So say the medics were there. They were another EMS agency, and let's say it was medic 5-3. We can add them. And you can also look for the police department, but if you notice the police department is not listed here, so we can use this little search button, and we can just type it in. So it wouldn't be Police Central Communications, but the police department actually isn't listed here, so you can just leave it as Newton Police Department, type of service, law, agency. You're probably not going to know the number of the car and the number of the officer, but what you could do is put in, let's say it's Teets and Burke. Great. Any other agencies on scene? So if the fire department was there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Any exposure that happens if someone was exposed to something. If I had a needle stick, I would click on me and then a needle stick. Or if there was a dirty bomb or something, or nuclear waste on a call. Very unlikely, but this is the option that button lets you do. Patient belongings. If you're taking any patient belongings with them, so let's say that you have a cane and glasses that you're holding on to, put those down there. How are you moving the patient? If you move the patient to the vehicle, to the ambulance by stair chair, and then the stretcher, you select both of them. If the patient assisted or they walked, you could select that. If the patient was on a backboard or a Reeves or something, you could select other options. Position in the vehicle, how were they sitting? Were they upright? Were they Semi-Fowlers, were they supine? Most of our patients are probably going to be semi-Fowlers in the stretcher. How did they get from the vehicle to the ER? Most of the time it's either going to be assisted walked, sometimes a wheelchair if we brought it out for them, or a stretcher. Transport assessment, not necessarily something you have to fill out, but this is really more or less looking at reasons that the stretcher was medically necessary, reasons that the ambulance was necessary, which is really a billing issue. They just want to make sure that if they're billing for a call, that it was medically necessary for an ambulance to be used, but not necessarily something that we are going to have to fill out. Same thing with stretcher purpose. I would just really go, medical patient or trauma patient or something like that. We're not very concerned about the stretcher purpose right now because we aren't going to be billing. That's about it. Forms received delivered. If you received patient belongings like his cane, his glasses, you also want to mark that you deliver them to the hospital. Or if you received, a chart, you can refer and you could deliver it. And then in other options, factors affecting care here. If your response factor, one that I would mark into this one would be. It's not really an option that I see here. Maybe we'll have to change that. But for this, it would be other, dispatched to wrong location. This way, when you look at the times and say, well, why did it take you, 10 minutes to respond to your own building? You can say, oh, you were dispatched to the wrong location. Same thing at the scene. If there's anything that delayed access to the scene because maybe the patient was behind a locked door, you couldn't get to them, or it was an unsafe scene, so you were waiting for police to get there, or it was an MVA and it was prolonged extrication, anything like that. Transport factors, what delayed you from actually transporting the patient. Maybe as you were driving, you were involved in a motor vehicle accident. Obviously, that would delay the transport time. Or turnaround factors, if you got to the hospital and there was another call and you couldn't take it because you had to do decontamination, decon at the the ambulance, or the ED was overcrowded and it just took forever for you to actually transfer the patient over, anything like that. So that's the second page, the patient chief complaint history of patient information for this. We'll carry on for page 3.